Hello, everybody. I'm Howie Hawkins. I was the Green Party and the Socialist Party candidate for president in 2020. And this podcast called Green Socialist Notes is about continuing to educate and advocate for the eco-socialist program that we ran on in 2020. So I'm going to talk again about current affairs, and the top of the list right now is the genocide in Gaza. It just keeps going on. Trump's Middle East envoy, Steve Witkoff, and his ambassador to Israel, Mike Huckabee, were given a PR tour of one of the Gaza Humanitarian Foundation stations that is supposed to be delivering food to the Palestinians. And while they were there, Palestinians were being killed at the other stations. At least 91 were killed and 600 wounded while they're waiting for aid, while Witkoff and Huckabee did this public relations tour. And, more than 1,000 people have been killed at these stations, shot to death by Israeli soldiers and private security that's hired by the Gaza Humanitarian Foundation, which is the U.S. and Israeli, excuse for providing food to the starving people of Gaza. And not only shot with bullets, sometimes shelled with mortars or artillery tank rounds. It's one of the UN agencies called them death traps this week. Now, Israel let a little more food in this week because they're feeling the pressure, international pressure, and they know they're becoming, completely regarded around the world as a pariah state for this man-made starvation they've created in Gaza. So they let some airdrops come in, which is, drops in the bucket. And they let about 100 trucks in on Monday. But still, that's only a drop in really the ocean, more than a bucket. And just to feed people on a daily basis, they need 600 trucks going in every day. And a rational way to distribute the food, which would be to restore the UN facilities that were used by UNRWA and the World Food Program before Israel started this invasion of Gaza. Without that, what trucks are getting in, a lot of them are being besieged by hungry Palestinians before they even get to the distribution centers. Some are hijacked by criminal gangs, which then resell the food at high prices, which only some Palestinians can afford. And Trump has leverage over Netanyahu on this. And, we should demand that he use it. That's about the best we can do with Trump. There is a little good news on the Palestinian front this week. Senator Bernie Sanders forced votes on 2 resolutions against arms sales to Israel a couple of nights ago. One of the resolutions would have blocked $676 million sale of 5,000 heavy-duty bombs and 5,000 guidance kits for the bombs. And the other resolution would have prohibited the sale of 20,000 fully automatic assault rifles. The resolution against the bombs got 24 votes in the Senate, and the resolution against the assault rifles got 27 votes. And I don't know what the difference is and why the votes were different. Those votes are really pathetic given there's a genocide going on. But what we can take, why it's a little good news, is that it is an improvement over previous votes that Sanders has forced against arms to Israel. Last November, Sanders got 3 resolutions voted on, and they received, for different weapons packages, they received between 15 and 18 votes. And then another resolution in March, 15 votes. So now we get 24 to 27 votes. So we should take a little heart from a little progress, but it shows how far we have to go. So we have to keep pushing. As I've mentioned before, and we'll put this in the chat along with an article about the people that were killed at aid stations while Witkoff and Huckabee were doing this PR show. It's 4 resolutions that Pramila Jayapal has introduced. And, we should be talking to our representatives. The House is in recess for the rest of the summer till after Labor Day. And we should be hounding these representatives when they come back to our districts and demand that they support these resolutions against arms to sales to Israel, and if possible, get them to co-sponsor these resolutions. And then when they get back and tell them this now, they need to push for a vote on these resolutions, because we need to put these people on record. So when we come to the midterms next year, we can hold them accountable. So moving on to Ukraine, Russia keeps attacking on the front lines to take more territory, and they're terror bombing Ukrainian cities and towns far behind the front lines. And Putin's answer to Trump threatening sanctions seems to be to escalate. Just Thursday night, a couple of nights ago, Russian drone and missile strikes in Kyiv killed 31 people, including 5 children, and injured 150. This is way behind the front lines. This is not military. This is terror bombing. More than 100 buildings were damaged in Kyiv, including apartment blocks, homes, schools, kindergartens, medical facilities, and universities. So Trump has set this deadline. It used to be September 2nd. That was the 50-day deadline. Now he's pushed it up to next Friday, August 8th. And, we'll have to see. Are we going to get taco? Trump always chickens out, or are we going to get something? I mean, he's already compromised. The Senate bill called for 500% secondary tariffs on countries that buy oil and gas from Russia. Trump reduced that to 100. That's his threat. He only put 25% on India. And actually, India has started to stop buying oil from Russia and is buying it from Middle East petrostates in the spot market. So I think they expect Trump to do something. The 25% is the general tariff for India. Trump has said he may add to that. I think he said 40% more. That would be significant. But in response to Trump's sanctions threat, the other thing I was going to mention, the other thing that may happen this week is that Trump is sending Howard Witkoff? No, I just mentioned his name. Can't keep Stephen Witkoff. He's going to go meet Putin again this week. And, we saw what happened previously when Witkoff met there. Witkoff doesn't know a damn thing about Ukraine. He's a golfing buddy and real estate partner of Trump. And when he visited earlier in the year, he came back basically saying we could get a peace deal. Basically, Ukraine surrenders to Russia's demands, which included giving up territory that Russia does not now control, but is in the oblasts, the states that Russia claims to have annexed. And in an interview following that statement, Witkoff couldn't even name the oblasts. I mean, it's pretty pathetic, the level of people we're sending. And he's going to be putty in the hands of the Russians again, I'm afraid. So that may give Trump an excuse to, extend the time for Putin. And in the meantime, Trump's a little ticked off that Putin's mini-me, the former president Dmitry Medvedev, who was always, when he was president, he was really the puppet of Putin, who became prime minister for a term because Russia still had term limits. Putin got rid of those. And one of the things Medvedev said was that don't forget Russia's dead hand. And the dead hand refers to a system the Russians have, they claim to have, that if the Russian leadership is wiped out, the missiles will be sent to the United States automatically. This is one example of what Daniel Ellsberg talked about in his last book called The Doomsday Machine. And, he talked about the Russian dead hand. It's also true for the other countries, including the United States. Once the nuclear missiles fly, they'll all be fired. It's built into the systems, and that is what he called the Doomsday Machine. So Trump, made a stupid and dangerous response to Medvedev, who threatened nuclear, strikes again, by saying he would position 2 U.S. nuclear subs closer to Russia in response. This kind of brinkmanship could provoke a nuclear war by misrepresenting intentions or by mistake, and it makes no military sense. The U.S. already has nuclear-powered submarines that are deployed and capable of striking Russia in position. They always do. So this is not really a military move. It's Trump playing his reality show for TV and not dealing with the real world. And I'll just wrap up my opening remarks by talking about Trump, because this is an example of how he's like a child who lives in a make-believe world. Another example of this was yesterday. He fired the head of the Bureau of Labor Statistics because he didn't like the jobs report and said they were fake numbers. And then he's, imposing these tariffs, which are going to hurt the job numbers and going to increase inflation. But he's going ahead anyway in his make-believe world. So, we need to keep being out in the streets against Trump. Indivisible has more actions this weekend. There's lots of opportunities for this. We need to show up. And Trump's poll numbers are declining as people realize what a bad job he's doing as far as it affects them and how he's handling, immigration and tariffs and, the attack on the universities. I mean, he's given people a lot of reasons to move away from him. But we need to do more than just show up at these demonstrations. As I've been saying, and I'll wrap up with this, is we need to be really focused on building the political alternative that can organize the progressive majority that exists in this country. And I've, put articles in the chat in previous podcast to an article I wrote in New Politics, the winter edition, about the political paradox that the progressive majority of Americans, which the poll numbers show exists, elected a right-wing president. And, my question was, how did that happen? And, of course, Harris didn't run a campaign that could attract the people having economic difficulties. She pandered to the elites and bragged about the billionaires that supported her and campaign running around with Republicans like Liz Cheney. And I pointed this out last week. I don't have the link again, but there was a poll came out, showed that all the people that stayed home, and she got a lot less votes than Biden did, said they didn't go out because she didn't speak to their economic issues. That was the main reason. So we got to organize this this progressive majority into an effective political force that can defeat both the fascist Republicans and their enablers, the neoliberal Democrats. And as I've been arguing, we can't do that inside the Democratic Party. That's irreversibly in control of the neoliberal corporate militarists. We have to build the Green Party or some independent progressive party from the bottom up. And instead, Greens have elected hundreds. We should be electing thousands to local office under the Trump administration. And then on that foundation of experienced local elected officials and campaigners and a local mass base of members and supporters that we build, we can start running competitive and often increasingly winning races for the State House and the House of Representatives. And when we get a Green or Independent Progressive Caucus in the House of Representatives, we'll begin to have leverage, real leverage on national policy. Right now, we can be ignored, because we run marginal campaigns for president or U.S. Senate in big states, and it doesn't have the impact that if we had people in the House, the Democrats would have to give us something to get something on close votes, and we'd have a platform, a national stage to talk about our real solutions to the problems we face. So that's the goals toward which I think we all should be organizing, starting in our own communities. So with that, I didn't go on for half an hour like the last couple of times. Let's discuss your comments and your questions. Scout Trooper 164. Howie, I know I felt sometime before the hard part of America is admitting to being wrong, and I accepted your answer, but I feel I should expand upon it. Okay, this is 4 parts. Because besides immigration, America wanted England to make peace with Hitler, like how some want Ukraine to make peace with Putin. And that applies to things like slavery and Watergate. People keep focusing on the short-term effects of what they can accomplish, like the FBI torturing people to try and brainwash folks in the 50s and 60s. Didn't matter if it met a goal. Even today, Trump's policies, people can't bring themselves to admit they were wrong about what he would and wouldn't do. With history in mind, what do you think of this problem? Well, going back to World War II, there was an America First movement that, said appease or make peace with Hitler. But that changed, when it became apparent what Hitler was doing, and especially after Japan attacked Pearl Harbor. I'm trying to think of your other examples. Slavery, there was support for slavery. There was also an abolitionist movement, which came to be expressed by the 1850s in the Republican Party, which by the time Lincoln ran in 1860 and won, had already been the second party in the House of Representatives since 1856 elections. So they did it again in 1858. And I'm not recalling your other examples. Trump. I think actually some people are starting to change their mind about Trump. So what do I think of this problem? I think if you look at the cases you mentioned, there were Americans who had the wrong position, but we also changed their minds and built movements that changed the policy. So I think, you look at history and look at our movements, we do make a difference. And I think, that's the way we need to look at it. We need to realize, be confident in our position, that it's morally righteous and that it's accurate in terms of how the solutions we propose would correct a lot of the problems we're addressing, and go out there and talk to people and organize and run our candidates and have our demonstrations and our news releases and our educational forums, and know that it makes a difference. There's in terms of the people that are really active as organizers in politics, whether it's major party politics or the left opposition, it's not a lot of number of people. So, when you think of a few thousand people that are really the activists, the organizers on the left in this country, you're taking up that role. It makes a huge difference. So that's the way I look at it. Scout Trooper 164. Any comments on Breaking Point's interview with Slotkin? I haven't heard about it, so I really can't comment. You could elaborate in the chat and maybe I could say a few words. At war with dust. Whenever we note the role climate change plays in worsening deadly floods like Central Texas just went through, we're accused of politicizing a strategy. What is the best way to reply to that? Well, the people that don't want to look at the causes of tragedies like that, saying it's politicizing the tragedy, are politicizing the tragedy. When there's a problem, you need a solution. And to talk about that, in this case, climate change played a big role in that. The larger storms we're getting, bigger flash floods. So I think the best way to reply to that charge is just keep talking about, climate change and say these people are trying to change the subject and avoid accountability for why we're having that problem. So I just say, don't let them intimidate you into being silent because you're political. Politics is how we solve problems. Scout Trooper 164. What do you think of Trump's policies now affecting Las Vegas, where it's practically abandoned? Goes to show not to be mean to others and act entitled. I'm not sure what you're talking about. Trump's policies affecting Las Vegas. Maybe you're talking about the immigration roundups and Las Vegas doesn't have enough workers. I'm not sure. So I'm not sure what else to say. B.D. Dimmitt. A Pittsburgh candidacy is being attacked by local Democrats committee, and he provides a link. Okay, I'll look at the link if it'll work. Is he being attacked for, the candidate is Alex Rose? No, I'm not sure, let me look. Okay, Alex Rose is working with the county's Democratic committee, who's an independent candidate, to challenge Green Party candidate Theron Gilliland Jr. To get him off the ballot. Yeah. Well, Rose has filed to run as an independent using the Labor Party on his petition papers. So why is the Democratic Party concerned? Because this guy is probably really a Democrat. And they don't want competition. So, that shows how not democratic, small d, the capital D Democratic Party is. Yeah, we go through this everywhere, and it's sorry. I mean, not other countries really don't have this problem. A lot of other countries don't have this problem. The more democratic countries. You get countries like, Russia or Venezuela, where they just knock candidates off the ballot for arbitrary reasons without much recourse. Here, at least it can't be arbitrary, there are rules, but the rules are so biased toward the major parties that it's difficult for third parties to get their candidates on the ballot. Yeah, the Democrats in Pittsburgh should be ashamed of themselves. Okay, the thing about Las Vegas is it's an attraction and nobody is coming. And because nobody is coming to Las Vegas from other countries, there's significantly less business going on. Not to mention stuff there is getting even more expensive. Tariffs are effing it up. Yeah, I get it now. Tourists aren't coming to the United States. It's not just Las Vegas. People are worried about, the harassment they might get over their visas. And so, and the craziness of what's going on with Trump, the police state tactics, people are saying, like the State Department says, don't go to this country or that country because it's not safe. Now people around the world are thinking the United States is not safe for tourists anyway. And so that's another way Trump is screwing things up. I see in the chat, Alex. Yeah, here it is. A. Jones. I'm sorry, I started to say Alex Jones, who's a right-wing conspiracy nut. A. Jones 35. Las Vegas employment is the highest in the U.S. along with the housing markets off the chart. Yeah. Yep. It's Trump is making a mess, and so he fires the woman that was head of the agency that produced a jobs report that indicated how bad it is. Part of thing about that report is it when it goes back after each month's report and gets more verification of earlier reports, that report showed that earlier months the job numbers created as reported were actually less. So Trump is doing a good job of tanking the economy. Edie Dimmitt, is there any record of reasoning supporting that Janet Yellen's refusal to provide Jill Stein or Mike Pence with matching funds during the primary? What Janet Yellen's Treasury Department, and I don't know if she was personally in charge of this decision, did in the case of Jill Stein, I can't speak to Mike Pence's case, although it's probably the same. I didn't know he'd been denied as well. What happened was Congress raided the fund that would pay for primary matching funds for presidential candidates, as well as the general election fund that the major party candidates don't take anymore because it's only $100 million something, and they need billions. So and if they accept that public money, they can't raise more private money. So that was a moot point. And they said what the Federal Election Commission said, and the Treasury Department backed them up, is that, well, until we get an answer from Biden or Harris and Trump that they don't want that public money for the fall, we can't spend any money out of the fund because then there won't be enough. And, why does the major party candidates get priority for public money and everybody knew they weren't going to take it when the, primary candidates that qualified needed that money in Jill Stein's case to get on a ballot? That's what Greens use that matching funds for. And you have to spend that matching funds on primary election related activities. So if you get the money later, as Jill Stein did, how do you justify spending that money when the primaries are over? And I don't know how they did in the Jill Stein campaign. Well, the way we did it in my campaign was we credited our glorified volunteers who are getting small stipends with payments for their work, with the understanding they would get paid retroactively when we got the matching funds, which we never got. But if we had got them, that's how we would have spent it for the primary, for the time those people were working during the primary elections. So I think, Beatty, if you look in the newspaper reports at the time, you will find stories. In fact, now that I think about it, I think it was the Daily Beast or Raw Story that a reporter reported on the raiding of that fund by the Congress, and what they gave them money for was actually good things. One was shoring up election administration, and the other was Secret Service details for presidential candidates, which is needed. But okay, Beatty's saying in the chat, I know that much background, but the money remained in the fund until September. The funds going to the Secret Service were to come from unobligated money. Yeah, well, I think the rationale, Beatty, is that the FEC and the Treasury said we have to get a no on the public money for the fall from the major party candidates before we can release the primary funds, because it had been rated so much that they couldn't pay out. I think there was something like 17 million left in the funds, which would have been plenty for Jill, probably for Pence. Yeah, certainly for Pence too. But if they'd had to pay the major party candidates, it would have been $200 million. The Secret Service was to receive $320 million. Yeah, they substantially, there was hundreds of millions in that fund when they raided most of it. So, that was bipartisan attack, because the law passed with bipartisan support to public funding of presidential elections. Joanna Munley, what is the significance of England and Canada recognizing a Palestinian state? What consequences will this have in September? I guess in September, that's when they will formally recognize a Palestinian state. Well, there's something like 145 countries in the world now that have recognized a Palestinian state. I think it isolates Israel more. England and Canada would not have done this if it wasn't for the genocide going on in Gaza, particularly the forced starvation. So, and then in September, there's a big conference, I think it's at the UN, where the Arab states and some European states are leading a conference on a two-state solution, basically saying it's time to implement international law reflected in General Assembly resolutions going back to 1967 that said there should be an independent Palestinian state side by side with Israel in the borders that were established after the 67 war. And that is, and other parts of that is, that's basically what they want to do. And as I recall, I mean, when the Arabs were pushing this maybe late last year, they were saying the UN should provide peacekeeping forces to enforce the boundaries between Israel and the Palestinian state. So basically they want to use international law to force this issue. And the big obstacle is the U.S. If the U.S. gets behind this, Israel would not have the power to resist it. With the U.S. providing Israel with diplomatic and military support, Israel will be able to resist it. So, this international conference will be important if it does, come up with a plan for getting to a two-state solution. But the U.S., if the U.S. isn't on board, it's not going to happen. So that puts the onus back on us to push for this. And, we'll see what happens. But I think the significance is England, or really the UK and Canada, are going to be part of that effort to really push for a two-state solution, an independent Palestinian state that's been, the consensus of most of the international community since 1967. And, that could force the issue and put Israel in a place where it's as isolated as South Africa was before it abandoned apartheid. And again, it's the U.S. that's the linchpin to this whole process. So, that's where we come in. Scout Trooper 164. It wasn't just the economy that Kamala Harris lost. She didn't address the Gaza genocide, and she ignored progressives and socialists and tried to siphon Republicans. Same shit Clinton lost to. Yeah, I would say it's the same centrist, neoliberal, corporate militarist approach that Clinton had. That's the Democratic Party. Unfortunately, from the polling data I've seen, the Gaza question was very low on people's minds and wasn't what persuaded them to not vote for Kamala Harris, except for a small percentage. Fox did an exit poll on that with the AP, and it's pretty clear it was small. There was a poll that the Council on Arab Islamic American Affairs, or American Islamic Affairs, CARE, which said more than half of the Arab and Muslim vote went to Jill Stein, but I find that hard to believe because that would have been about 1 million votes. And that means Jill's green vote would have gone way down. And I just don't think that adds up. Now, there was a more recent poll, and this was the poll I referenced earlier about why people stayed home and didn't vote for Harris, who had voted for Biden, and they were asked why. And economic issues were the top issue, but a significant portion of them, I forget the percentages now, but a significant proportion said that Harris's position on the Israeli war in Gaza was, a reason why they stayed home. So I think it was a factor for a lot of people, but I think it's been exaggerated by some. Unfortunately, Gaza should have been higher on people's list because the genocide, is not something that should be ignored. But most voters were focused more on pocketbook issues. That's pretty clear from the polls. I should say focus more on pocketbook issues. There's other polling that shows, and this is interesting, CBS did polls right after the war started in October 2023, and then again, I think in March, and then again in June. And in the first poll, a small majority, like 53%, wanted to cut off all arms to Israel once they saw the devastation in Gaza. And by March, it had gone, I think, 61%, in June by 62%. What's interesting is that question hasn't been polled again by CBS or anybody else I can find. So, Harris, in terms of the voters' preferences, if she'd have distanced herself from Biden's policy and said, we got to protect the Palestinians and tell Israel to knock it off, call off the invasion, have a ceasefire. If she'd have taken positions like that, it would have been popular. But like I said, the Gaza question was lower on people's hierarchy of issues, well below the economic questions. At War with Dust. Regina Spektor is a talented singer-songwriter who's participated in pro-Israel rallies and accused pro-Palestinian protesters who interrupted her shows of anti-Semitism. Given the ongoing genocide in Gaza, in Gaza, is it possible to enjoy music apolitically these days? Should music reviewers cover her concerts without mentioning her regrettable stance? Not with the genocide going on. You cannot be apolitical or neutral. And music reviewers should let people who are reading the reviews know where this singer-songwriter stands. And then, the readers can make up their minds about whether they want to patronize this singer-songwriter. I think you can't be apolitical or neutral while a genocide is going on. It's just unacceptable. Andrew Hager. Howie, what are your thoughts on YouTube's latest plan involving users having to submit their ID to keep their channels to avoid artificial intelligence, AI, deeming them as children or teenagers? So YouTube wants you to provide your ID so they don't use AI to determine whether you're underage. So when they have to submit their ID, does that mean to get on to YouTube or to post a YouTube video? I'm just thinking about this for the first time. If it sounds like if you don't submit the ID, they're going to use AI. So you sort of have a choice. And I guess if you don't want to hide your identification, you give it to YouTube and don't have AI do it. And the AI makes a lot of mistakes. So I don't know, Andrew, what do you think? Because I'm not sure what I think. I think if YouTube did not, say provide your ID or we're going to have AI do it, They're going to have AI do it. And, um, they're trying to protect their platform from being accessed, or content on their platform that's unsuitable for underage people being accessed. So I can see their point of view and saying, look, in order to, make these barriers effective, we've got to either get your idea or we're going to have AI do it. So I think it's probably a reasonable policy, but it's the first I've thought about it, and I'm thinking out loud. If anybody has any other thoughts, put it in the chat. AI, Scout Trooper 164. Any thoughts on CEOs getting excited over replacing workers with AI? The job and housing market will essentially disappear. I'm not sure AI is going to replace that many workers. I think that is something that's hard to predict, because, the use of the internet or computers, software, databases, all that was said would reduce the number of jobs, but all they ended up doing was really create other jobs. So I'm not sure, what the impact of AI will be. Technology often is said, new technology is going to replace jobs, but then the production systems that are set up around it keep creating jobs. And the housing market, how will AI make the housing market disappear? I don't think it will. I think, AI will be used. You'll ask AI, find me a house within this price range in this kind of neighborhood in this city with these amenities, and you list them. And it will find it, pretty fast, faster than you would scrolling through different listings. But of course, you always have to double check what AI produces. So if they give you some listings, you check on them and see if it meets your specifications. So I'm not sure how that's going to affect the housing market, but maybe I'm not thinking of something. Okay, Scout Trooper 64 says nobody would be able to buy houses because the jobs would be low and the wages not available. Okay, I see your point. Yeah, if AI replaces workers and workers don't have jobs and they don't have money to buy houses or rent apartments, the housing market would go down as well. But I still think the jury is out on whether AI is going to lead to drastic reduction in the total number of jobs. Vicky Corden, I do not like the idea of having to show IT for YouTube. They always use the excuse of protecting kids in order to do surveillance on people. It could be abused by authoritarians. Yep, that's right. But if they're using AI to ID you anyway, I think what's required is more regulation of the platform so your data remains private. Europe has those kind of regulations. We tend to be deregulating the platforms, particularly under the Trump administration, and that's the wrong way to go. So, like your personal data at your bank, you give it to them, so the security of your accounts is assured and nobody else is withdrawing money from your account and so forth. But we assume that the bank keeps that data to itself and doesn't, sell it or give it away to other companies or government agencies and so forth. So, although there are some regulations they do have to provide to the government, like any transaction of $10,000 or more has to be reported. That's supposedly to deal with drug deals. So I think the answer here is we need to have good regulation of that protects our personal data. and our browsing history. YouTube would get that. They know where you were on videos, and you may not want people to know what videos you're watching. So that, is probably something that they should be prohibited from sharing. Andrew Hager, Howie, what do you think is our best option for saving the Corporation for Public Broadcasting from bankruptcy, thus saving PBS and NPR along with it? Well, our House members are home. I would say put that on your agenda when you hound them wherever you can this month. You can donate. I know they're trying to raise money, but I saw a news report they expect to be, going out of business early next year. And that still leaves us more than 2 years until we're post-Trump administration. Hopefully he doesn't go for a third term and somehow figures out how to do that and does it. I think we need to, defend it. And, if it does go out of business, let's demand that it be brought back and with more public funding, because part of the problem with the Corporation for Public Broadcasting is the federal government hasn't fully funded it. So it has had to go to the corporations for donations and accommodate them for their boards. So, for example, one of the Koch brothers was on the board of the Corporation for Public Broadcasting, pushing his agenda. So we need a Corporation for Public Broadcasting that's really public and not a hybrid of public and private financing. I think that's what we should be pushing for. And, let's make Trump's victory on this temporary. Any views on Trump protecting priests who have been sexually molesting kids? It sickens me how, once again, something that could help kids get stopped. Boy, I hadn't heard that. Scout Trooper 164 adds, there was a Catholic sex ring secular talk discussed 11 days ago that Trump refused to do investigation on. Trump is, he's pardoning the wrong people. Insurrectionists from January 6th, corporate criminals, and people like Leonard Peltier and Mumia Abu-Jamal and some other political prisoners really deserve pardons, at least commutations, so they can get out in the real world. They're not a threat to anybody. So, Trump is just, he's on the wrong side of everything. Vicky Corden, what do you think of Trump building a ballroom in the White House? He's using taxpayer money for that, and also golfing in Scotland. Yeah, he's cutting everybody else's benefits, Medicaid and SNAP, grants to universities. I mean, you go down the list, and meanwhile, he's indulging himself with a ballroom for the White House and an expensive golfing tour to his own resort in Scotland. It's just disrespectful to the ordinary working people of this country. Trump is who he is, and he's not attractive to a lot of people that see what you're seeing here. Unfortunately, he's got a lot of people in kind of a cult where he's like the strong man who's going to solve all the problems. And they don't know how he's going to do it or what he's going to do. They just know he said he's going to do it, and they're putting their faith in this reality TV show guy. But those people are a minority in this country. And the fact that Trump got power, raises the question of how do we get power for the progressive majority in this country? And, basically, I think the majority of people, when you poll them, they support not socialism, not, social ownership, the means of production, and a truly democratic economy, but they do support the kind of regulated social democratic capitalism that you see in Western Europe and Scandinavia. That's a progressive majority, and those issues, demanding those reforms, are winning issues. And it's really on us on the left to organize people in a way that can begin realizing those things that the people are for. And unfortunately, the dynamic really since about when Clinton came into Carter came into office, is that a lot of people vote the Democrats, some of them still having illusions about it being like the old New Deal Democrats, who did introduce some of those reforms. And now we got 50 years of experience where the Democrats are socially liberal. Yeah, that's true. They're not great. They're usually tailing behind public opinion, like on gay marriage, but on civil rights and abortion rights and those things, they are socially liberal. But when it comes to economic justice, egalitarian policies that would redistribute the wealth that has been so obscenely unequally distributed, they're against it. They're with the Republicans on that because the leadership of the Democratic Party is, they're super wealthy donors and the upper middle class professionals that run the party. And those people don't want to tax themselves to provide, decent public services and social benefits and protections to the American people. So we need to organize around them. And to me, we got to do it independently as a Democratic Party. People reforming the Democratic Party have been doing that, throughout this whole 50 years of Democratic Party neoliberalism. And they've never won. They've never won a single damn substantial reform that they put forward in that period, from a job guarantee, as the Congressional Black Caucus used to propose, a national health service providing universal public health care that Ron Dellums and the Congressional Black Caucus pushed, to public campaign financing, more recently, a more watered down of public health care through just socializing insurance, not the whole system. That's Medicare for all, we call it that. They haven't got anywhere on that because it's not the Democrats that stop them. The corporate Democrats stop the progressive Democrats before they even have to fight the Republicans. So it's time for people to realize we got to organize the progressive majority in this country independently of the Democratic Party and our own party. Andrew Hager, in your most honest, unbiased opinion, what is the difference between capitalism and corporatism? Well, I think, when people say corporatism, I think they're talking about the domination of big business in the economy and politics. And capitalism is, generalized commodity production for the market rather than for use, and rather than planned to meet people's needs, and private ownership of enterprises. And probably the most important thing is the exploitation of labor. So the capitalists take a substantial portion of the value you create with your work. And instead of that being yours, it's theirs. So you get exploitation and growing inequality. I think you're really looking at definitions. So when people use capitalism, talking about the system. When they use corporatism, they're talking about the fact that big business corporations are dominating. So some people that criticize corporatism but not capitalism, basically they want to, have bust up the big corporations and have, smaller businesses competing on the market. And I don't think that's the answer, because the tendency of that competition is to lead to monopolization, as the losers in that competition get taken over by the winners. So a a capitalism of small businesses is working against the logic of capitalism. So I think when people say capitalism, they're talking about system change. When they say corporatism, they're talking about reining in the influence of big business. B.D. Dimmitt, by the way, the decision not to release the funds rested entirely on the belief of the Treasury Secretary that there was, or possibly that there would be, a shortage of money to pay out the full amounts required for all campaigns. It was definitely Yellen's decision on paper, however she may have been pressured. Yeah, you may have said more articulately than I did, but yeah, that's right. They didn't have the funds to pay out all the amounts that would have been required in theory, and that means most of that money would have gone to the major party candidates as public funding, but they were never going to take it. Everybody knew that, and Yellen and the Treasury Department knew that too. So it was kind of a fiction that hurt Jill Stein in particular, and Pence. I don't know if it hurt him so much because he was really never in the running anyway, but I'm sure he would have liked the funding to use in his campaign against Trump, even though he wasn't going anywhere. But for Jill, it was about getting on the ballot, and that made a difference. Oh, wow, the time flies. I didn't realize we were already at the end of the hour. Well, one of the things I said, I just want to repeat, is that we do make a difference. I hope people take that to heart and, get out there. And you don't see immediate results, but one of the things about social change is you're convincing people who are not ready to admit it publicly because they're peer pressure. And at a certain point, everybody is ready to change their minds because their peers are changing their minds. And I've used the analogy of you watch a school of fish or a flock of birds make a sudden turn, and you don't even know how they all knew to do that together, but they do it. So keep out there. And next week I gotta go to a niece's wedding, so I'm gonna record an interview for the next podcast with Richard Smith. He is a expert on China and a climate activist, and he has a book out that came out in 2020 called China's Engine of Environmental Collapse. And I'll put that in the chat so people, can take a look at it. And also an article more recently, Why China Cannot Decarbonize. And he has an analysis of the Chinese social system. Some people call it socialist. He says it's a hybrid of, bureaucratic state planning and capitalism, and it's incapable of making the transition to renewables. It's dependent on growth. I'll let him give the whole analysis in the interview. And it's topical because a lot of people in the climate movement right now are saying, look at China. They're building more solar panels. They're installing more than the rest of the world combined, and they're going to lead the way. But it's not only solar that China's installing, it's also a lot of coal. Well, I'll let Richard fill it out. But anyway, take a look at his article, Why China Cannot Decarbonize, and he'll be speaking next week while I'm at my niece's wedding, and then I'll be back live the week after that. So everybody have a good week and stay active. It makes a difference.